when billionaire Donovan Reed invited the quiet daughter of his Filipino maid to play chess, just to be kind, he thought it would be a fun distraction. What he didn't know was that this shy 8-year-old girl would beat him at his own game and unlock a secret he'd buried for nearly a decade. She wasn't just a chess prodigy. She was his daughter. The car purred up the long, palm-lined driveway of Villa Estrella, the sprawling seaside mansion owned by billionaire Donovan Reed. 8-year-old Elena sat quietly in the back seat, pressing her small fingers against the cool glass window. Her wide brown eyes scanned the towering iron gates, the marble statues, and the endless rows of orchids that lined the garden walls. The house looked like something from the fairy tales she used to read when her mother had more time to tuck her in at night, before overtime shifts and aching feet replaced bedtime stories. Elena, her mother whispered, reaching back from the driver's seat to adjust her daughter's collar. Please remember what I said. No running, no touching anything, and absolutely no wandering off. You understand? Yes, Mama, Elena replied softly, nodding. Her voice was small but steady, as if she'd trained it to never cause trouble. Teresa glanced at her daughter in the mirror. She had her father's long lashes and her own cautious smile. It hurt to bring her here, to this world of chandeliers and silence, but her regular babysitter had called in sick and there was no one else to watch her child. Mr. Reed, surprisingly, had said it was fine. The car came to a gentle stop beneath the covered entrance. A butler opened the door with a practiced nod. Elena stepped out and instinctively reached for her mother's hand, but Teresa was already pulling a cleaning cart from the trunk. Just sit quietly in the study while I clean the guest wing. Do your homework, okay? Elena nodded again. She had brought her math workbook and a pack of pencils. Still, as they stepped inside, the beauty of the mansion overwhelmed her. Everything was polished and glowing. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, bouncing off grand chandeliers like glittering waterfalls. The floors were so shiny she could see her reflection like walking on glass. Wow, she whispered before she remembered to be quiet. Teresa led her through the hall into the study, a large room lined with ancient books and thick velvet curtains. There, in the center, stood a small table unlike any Elena had ever seen. It held a chessboard made of dark, rich Philippine mahogany. The pieces gleamed like tiny carved statues, each one shaped with the care of a sculptor's hand. The knights looked ready to gallop. The queen stood tall, almost regal. Elena's eyes widened. She wanted to touch them more than anything. Sit there, baby, Teresa said quickly. Finish your math pages and don't even think about touching that set. That's not a toy, okay? I won't, Elena said, dragging her feet to the small desk by the window. She tried to concentrate, really she did, but her eyes kept drifting back to the chessboard. Something about the way the pieces were arranged, it felt like they were waiting for her. Whispering, "You like chess?" a deep voice asked. Elena jumped. Her pencil rolled off the desk and clattered to the floor. She turned to see a tall man standing in the doorway. His salt and pepper hair was neatly combed and he wore a navy suit with no tie. His face was lined from years of thought, but his smile was gentle. I wasn't touching anything, Elena said quickly. I promise. I didn't ask if you touched it, he chuckled. I asked if you like chess. I don't know how to play, she admitted, but I think it's beautiful. Donovan Reed walked slowly into the study and approached the chessboard. He looked at her thoughtfully as if trying to solve a puzzle. Would you like to learn? Just for fun. Elena blinked. Really? Really? He sat down on one side of the board and motioned for her to join him. Let's just see what you already know. And with that, the game and something much greater began. Elena slid hesitantly into the tall leather chair across from Donovan Reed. Her feet didn't reach the floor, so they dangled as she tucked her hands into her lap. She didn't speak, but her eyes never left the pieces, so perfectly arranged on the board, like soldiers waiting for a command. Donovan noticed her nervous silence. He leaned slightly forward, lowering his voice to a warm, gentle tone. Don't worry, Elena. There are no wrong moves when you're learning. She nodded once. Okay, he said, pointing to the smallest figures in the front row. These are pawns. They usually move just one square forward, unless it's their very first move. Then they can move 2 squares. They attack diagonally. Elena's brows furrowed, just a little. So, they protect the others like a wall? Donovan tilted his head, impressed. That's a good way of putting it. He explained the rest slowly. The rooks moved straight, the knights in L shapes, the bishops sliced across the board like sharp thoughts. The queen, powerful and elegant, moved any direction, and the king was important but fragile. As he spoke, Elena began to mirror his instructions on the board without needing help. When he paused to explain something, she was already 2 moves ahead. The knight jumps over pieces, he said. I know, she said softly. It moves like a hook. Like a hook. L shape. 2 squares one way, then one to the side. Like it's sneaking around. Donovan blinked. That's exactly right. She bit her lip, unsure if she'd spoken too much. Don't be shy, he encouraged. You're seeing it all very quickly. Elena shrugged, still staring at the board. It just makes sense. He decided to test her. He set up a simple scenario, one he used years ago when teaching his godson. Let's pretend you're white. How would you stop black from taking your king in 3 moves? Elena looked at the pieces. Her eyes darted between them, not in panic, but in quiet calculation. She touched a pawn, then moved her knight, then frowned and undid it. Wait, no, she murmured. The bishop first, then. She moved 3 pieces, carefully and with purpose. Donovan followed the sequence with rising interest. That's perfect, he murmured. It's like I can see where they want to go, Elena said, tapping her pencil on the table. Like the board is talking to me. He sat back slowly. He had taught dozens of children to play chess, and none had ever said that. Chess was usually awkward at first, frustrating, messy, slow. But Elena wasn't just playing. She was seeing. Her understanding was instinctive, precise, almost poetic. He set up another configuration, more advanced. What would you do here? Elena leaned in, her small hands clasped under her chin. Then she giggled quietly. You're trying to trick me. Am I? The knight, it's a trap. If I take that pawn, your rook will check me. Donovan stared at her. Most adult beginners didn't spot that trap. Very good, he said, eyebrows raised. That trap usually catches people. I don't like traps, she said thoughtfully. I like puzzles. Puzzles? When the pieces fit together. Like this one. She moved a pawn to clear the path for her bishop, then used her rook to protect the queen. It was a miniature masterpiece of strategy. Donovan didn't say anything for a long moment. Elena, he said slowly, has anyone ever taught you chess before? She shook her head. Only seen it once at school. We weren't allowed to touch the set. And your mother? No, she whispered. Mama's always working. Donovan smiled, but his mind raced. This child wasn't just gifted, she was extraordinary. He'd seen prodigies before, but they always came from private academies and trained coaches. Elena came from nowhere, with no resources, no lessons, just raw, dazzling talent. She looked up at him suddenly. Do you want to play a real game? He laughed, genuinely delighted. I would be honored. They played. Slowly, gently. Donovan didn't let her win, but she didn't need him to. Move by move, she began to match him, predicting counters, adjusting her approach. She didn't beat him that day, but she came shockingly close. As the sun dipped through the stained glass windows, casting a soft golden light over the board, Donovan leaned back in awe. Elena, he said, I think we're going to need a lot more games. As the game ended, Donovan quietly studied the board. Elena had nearly cornered his king. Her strategy wasn't textbook, but it had a strange elegance, instinctive, unpredictable, almost beautiful. Across from him, Elena waited, her hands in her lap, eyes cast down. She wasn't sure if she had done well or disappointed him. You nearly had me, he finally said. Her head lifted an inch. Really? Really, he smiled. Would you like to come back tomorrow? We could play again. Elena's face lit up, shyly but bright, like a lamp flickering to life. Can I, Mama? She asked, turning to the doorway where Teresa stood, mop in hand. Teresa looked startled. She'd been quietly cleaning near the hall, ears half listening, nerves twisting in her stomach. Sir, that's very kind of you, but I'd be happy to host her, Donovan said gently, not as a man making an offer, but as someone genuinely intrigued. She's remarkable. Teresa's brow furrowed. She wasn't sure what to say. Her entire job revolved around blending into the background, being unseen, unheard. And now her daughter was the center of attention in one of the richest homes in Manila. I don't want her to be a bother, she said, voice cautious. She wouldn't be, Donovan replied. In fact, she'd be doing me a favor. This house is far too quiet. I've forgotten how good it feels to teach someone something real. Teresa hesitated, still holding her cleaning cloth. She looked at Elena, who was trying hard to stay composed, but whose little fingers were curled tight with hope. We'll just try tomorrow, she said. One day at a time. Tomorrow turned into the next day. And then the next. Each afternoon after school, Elena would change into a clean dress, gather her pencil case and her math book and ride with her mother back to the mansion. Donovan was always waiting, sometimes with a new chess puzzle already set up, sometimes with pastries or tea. They played in the same sunlit study, surrounded by books and silence and the quiet ticking of the wall clock. Elena absorbed everything. Her questions grew sharper, her moves more creative. She never asked to win. She only asked why this piece and not that one, why defend instead of attack, why sacrifice the knight at all. On day 5, she forced a draw. On day 7, she trapped his queen. On day 10, she whispered checkmate and sat very still as if she couldn't believe what she'd done. Donovan stared at the board for a long time. Then he leaned back and laughed, a deep, stunned, joyful sound that echoed against the walls. You beat me, he said, fair and square. Elena blinked. Are you sure? Positive. She smiled, small, humble. but it reached her eyes. That night, she dreamt of the chessboard again. But this time it wasn't made of wood. It floated in the stars. The pieces danced, twirling through galaxies, bishops like shooting stars and queens like comets. They moved not with logic, but rhythm. Like music, the routine continued. Donovan began preparing more advanced puzzles, some pulled from Grandmaster games, others composed himself. Elena solved them with eerie speed. She wasn't memorizing patterns. She was feeling them, anticipating, reacting with grace and creativity, like someone who had played this game before she could speak. In the quiet moments between games, Donovan would sometimes just watch her. The tilt of her head when she thought, the way she tapped her chin with her pinky finger, just like, he stopped himself. No, don't go there. But it was getting harder to ignore. She didn't just have talent. She had his instinct for long-term thinking, his exact hand gestures. Even the way she narrowed her eyes at the board, it was familiar. One day, Elena leaned forward during a tough mid-game sequence. "Mr. Reed, do you think chess is like a dance?" "A dance?" She nodded. "It's like, when the pieces move right, it feels like they're doing a waltz. And when it's wrong, they crash. Like clumsy feet." Donovan sat still, stunned. He had once said that exact sentence to someone a long time ago, years before the mansion, before the fortune. To Teresa, back when they were just two interns in a quiet university chess club. He had said, "Chess isn't war. It's a waltz. Grace in motion." Now here it was, echoed by a child who shouldn't know it. A child with brown eyes, and his unmistakable analytical mind. He looked over to the hallway where Teresa stood quietly pretending to dust a bookshelf she'd already wiped clean twice. Their eyes met briefly. She turned away. That evening, Donovan stood alone in his study after the two had left. The mahogany board was empty. He ran a hand through his hair and opened the drawer of his old writing desk. Inside was a photograph, faded but clear. It showed a younger version of him and Teresa seated together on a park bench, both smiling, chessboard on their knees. It was their final summer before everything changed. Before she vanished without a word. His hand trembled as he picked up the photo. "Is it possible?" he whispered to no one. He glanced back at the chess table, at the chair where Elena had sat just hours ago, laughing softly as she captured his rook with a perfectly timed bishop move. Maybe this wasn't just talent. Maybe it was heritage. That night, Elena sat cross-legged on her bed, her chess workbook open but forgotten. Her eyes traced the cracks on the ceiling as her thoughts drifted, like pieces waiting for their turn on the board. Something had changed in the last few days. Mr. Reed had started looking at her differently, not in a bad way, not angry or annoyed. Just searching. Like he was trying to find something in her face that he couldn't quite place. "Mama," she called softly through the thin wall that separated their rooms. A few seconds later, Teresa appeared in the doorway, towel over her shoulder, eyes tired but warm. "Yes, Anik. Why does Mr. Reed stare at me sometimes?" Teresa's body stiffened just slightly. "What do you mean?" "Not in a weird way. Just like he's thinking really hard. Like he's seen me before." Teresa walked into the room and sat on the edge of the bed. "He probably just sees how smart you are. That's all." "But it's more than that," Elena insisted. "He looks at me the same way you do when you look at old photos. Like he's remembering something he lost." Teresa didn't reply. Her fingers tightened around the towel. Elena reached out and gently placed her hand on her mother's. "Do I look like anyone you used to know?" Teresa smiled faintly, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You look like you, and that's all that matters." But when Elena fell asleep minutes later, Teresa didn't return to the kitchen or the laundry basket. Instead, she pulled an old shoebox from the closet and carried it to the living room table. She opened it slowly, like opening a wound. Inside were old envelopes, receipts, a broken bracelet, and a photograph. She held it for a long time in the dim light of the lamp. Two younger people sat on a wooden bench in the photo, Donovan and herself, laughing, a chessboard between them, a mango tree in the background. Her belly had been flat then. The world had still felt safe. Teresa closed her eyes and pressed the photo to her chest. She hadn't meant to disappear without saying goodbye. But when the test turned positive and the whispers about her and the boss started growing louder in the university staff room, fear had taken over. She hadn't wanted to raise a child in someone else's shadow. She wanted Elena to have her own name, her own path. Not as a secret, not as an accident, but now the past was back. And it had gray eyes and a mahogany chessboard. Underscore 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 underscore. Underscore 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 underscore. Meanwhile, across town in his sprawling study, Donovan opened the same drawer he hadn't touched in years. His fingers hovered over the photograph for a long moment before pulling it out. There they were, him and Teresa, captured in a slice of sunlight and summer. He studied her face, then his own. Then he imagined Elena's between them. The resemblance was no longer a question. It was a revelation. He moved to his desk and pulled open another drawer. Beneath a stack of old correspondence was a folded ultrasound photo, the ink slightly faded. Baby T, 8 weeks. It had been slipped into a Christmas card he'd never understood, one sent anonymously 9 years ago. He had kept it, unsure why. Now suddenly it made sense. She's mine, he whispered aloud, as if hearing the words would make them less impossible. His heart pounded. Why hadn't Teresa told him? Had he done something wrong back then? Had she thought he wouldn't want the child? Or worse, that he'd try to own the child like some legacy instead of love her? He closed his eyes, the memory of those days flooding in. They'd been close once. Long before the tech empires, the private jets, and boardroom deals. She had been his assistant at the university's chess outreach program. He was the rising entrepreneur with a soft spot for endgames. They had laughed in the quiet spaces between moves, fallen into something soft and unspoken. But when his funding took him overseas and she vanished without a word, he had buried that chapter deep. Until now. Until a little girl with sharp eyes and sharper instincts had walked into his house and nearly beat him at his own game. He sat back in his chair, the photograph resting gently in his hand. Suddenly, he wasn't thinking like a billionaire. He wasn't even thinking like a chess player. He was thinking like a father who had missed 8 years of his child's life. Underscore 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 underscore. The next afternoon, Elena noticed something different when she arrived. Donovan wasn't his usual calm, composed self. His smile was there, but his eyes held something heavier. She didn't understand it, but she felt it. During the game, she hesitated. Mr. Reed? Yes, Elena? Did I do something wrong? He looked startled. What? No. Why would you think that? You look sad. Like when people remember something important but can't talk about it. He sighed and leaned forward. Sometimes the past catches up with you, and it asks questions you thought you'd buried. Elena nodded, though she didn't fully understand. Is that like in chess? How so? When you make a move, but forget how it started. Then suddenly you realize it was leading here all along. Donovan stared at her. Yes, he said slowly. It's exactly like that. Later that evening, as she left with her mother, Donovan lingered at the front steps. Teresa glanced back as she opened the car door. Their eyes met. He didn't say a word, but she knew. He knew. The morning sunlight filtered softly into Donovan's library as he adjusted the position of the heavy mahogany chessboard for the third time. He had never been this nervous before, not during boardroom takeovers, not even during his first IPO. But today wasn't business. Today was about her. Across the boardroom-sized room, Elena sat cross-legged on the velvet armchair, humming softly to herself and flipping through a puzzle book. Her fingers danced through a combination she had memorized only last night. Unaware, unbothered. Calm. Then the door opened and an old man stepped inside, walking slowly but with purpose. Elena, Donovan stood up. This is Dr. Ernesto Agbayani. Elena blinked at the name. It was familiar. The guy with the books? Dr. Agbayani chuckled. I suppose that's one way to be remembered. He was in his late 70s, his silver hair tied neatly in a ponytail, a scarf looped loosely around his neck. Though age lined his face, his eyes were sharp, like someone who had once faced giants across 64 squares and won. I used to read about you in the newspaper, Teresa said, entering the room behind Elena. Her voice was respectful but cautious. Dr. Agbayani nodded. Back when newspapers still cared about chess, he smiled, then turned to Elena. So this is the girl who's been beating Donovan Reed. I only beat him once, Elena said, a little bashfully. Donovan smiled. She's being modest. She's beat me 6 times. This week. Ah, Agbayani said, sitting at the board. Then perhaps I'm the one who should be nervous. They arranged the pieces quietly. Teresa stood in the back, arms folded tightly. Donovan moved beside her, but said nothing. Neither parent wanted to interrupt what was about to unfold. I'll play white, Dr. Agbayani said gently. You may begin. Elena nodded, lifting her knight and placing it without hesitation. The game began. At first, the room was filled with the soft tapping of carved wood and ticking from the grandfather clock. Then silence, heavy and focused. Elena's face was unreadable. Dr. Agbayani tilted his head from time to time, occasionally muttering under his breath. 5 moves. 10. 15. By move 20, his brows had knitted together. By move 30, he had leaned so far over the board his glasses almost touched the king. And by move 35, he whispered almost reverently, "Checkmate." Elena blinked. "I won?" she asked, voice small. Dr. Agbayani sat back slowly. His fingers lifted and then dropped again onto his lap, stunned. He looked at Donovan, then at Teresa, then back at the girl. "You did," he said. "You beat me." "I thought. I was just trying to protect my queen," Elena mumbled. "And then the trap, it happened." He stared at her a moment longer. Then he stood. "This child must be trained." Teresa's body tensed. Donovan's eyes flicked toward her. "She's a once-in-a-century mind," Agbayani continued. "I have trained grandmasters. I have played with champions. But this girl doesn't play like she learned it, she plays like she remembers it. As if it's part of her." Elena looked from face to face. "Did I do something wrong?" Dr. Agbayani knelt by her chair. "No, Hija. You did something remarkable." She smiled. But Teresa did not. After Agbayani thanked them and left, Donovan turned to her. "We can't ignore this anymore." "I know," Teresa said flatly. "She needs a mentor. She needs competition. I'll cover everything: coaching, travel, education. You won't need to pay a cent." "She's 8, Teresa snapped. "Not a brand to be managed, not a prodigy to be put on a podium. She's just a little girl who likes puzzles." "She's more than that," he said, voice rising. "You know it. And what happens when the sponsors come? The interviews? The pressure? Will they love her when she loses? Or when she wants to play piano instead?" "I'll protect her," Donovan said, stepping forward. "I'll make sure." "You weren't there to protect her," Teresa whispered. "Not when she was born. Not when she asked me who her father was. Now you want to own her future." The words landed hard, and silence followed. Elena stood at the doorway, having heard more than they intended. Her voice was quiet. "I don't want to be famous." They turned to her. "I just want to play chess," she continued. "Maybe help others learn too. But I don't want to stop being me." Donovan stepped forward, gently. "You can be anything you want to be, Elena. I just want to give you the choice." Teresa's expression softened, but didn't vanish. "Then promise you'll let her stay a child, too." "I promise." Elena looked between them, unsure of what the moment meant, only that something big was coming. Something that would require more than strategy. Something that needed trust. The Manila Grand Hall buzzed with nervous energy. Rows of neatly arranged chessboards stretched across the ballroom, each one a battleground waiting for war. Banners of the National Young Minds Chess Championship fluttered along the ceiling. Cameramen whispered into headsets, parents wrung their hands in the waiting area, and children, some as young as 6, others as old as 16, sat stiff-backed in their chairs, hearts pounding. Elena stood at the edge of the chaos, fingers gripping the hem of her floral dress. Her lanyard badge read, "Elena T. age 8. Around her, kids practiced on travel boards and whispered opening lines like magic spells. "I shouldn't be here," she murmured. "You absolutely should," Donovan said, kneeling beside her. "I'm the youngest. That's why you're the most exciting." Teresa stepped forward and gently adjusted Elena's collar. "Remember what we talked about. Win or lose, you're just here to have fun." Elena nodded slowly, but her eyes lingered on the room filled with kids in uniforms, some with coaches muttering last-minute tips into their ears. She had no team, no coach whispering strategy, just her mother and a man she was still getting used to calling Dad. "Players to your tables," the announcer called. Donovan and Teresa squeezed her hands one last time. Elena walked to table 9, where a boy with slicked-back hair and a smug expression sat waiting. "You're my opponent," he said, glancing at her ID. "What are you, in kindergarten?" Elena sat down calmly. "I'm 8. "Great," he smirked. "This'll be over in 10 minutes. They set up the board. The clock started. 10 minutes later, the room around them had grown quiet. Elena's fingers moved quickly but gently, setting up a fork that trapped his rook and bishop simultaneously. "Wait, what?" he gasped. She moved her queen into position. "Checkmate." The boy stared at the board in disbelief. You're a freak." Elena stood, gave a polite nod, and replied softly, "Thank you for the game." Underscore 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 underscore. Her second match was against a highly rated girl named Celine, known as the Mind Breaker of Devo. She wore glasses and kept her night polished between rounds. The match was longer, over an hour, and Celine played hard. She used the Sicilian defense and tried an early pawn storm, but Elena was patient. Her counterattack was slow, careful, like placing dominoes in reverse. When Elena cornered Celine's king on the 42nd move, there were already whispers circulating the room. Who is that girl? She's only 8? Where did she learn to play like that? Celine stood and offered a handshake. You're better than me, she admitted. But that was fun. Elena beamed. It really was. Underscore 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 underscore. By the third match, Elena's name was on the announcer's lips. Reporters leaned over velvet ropes trying to photograph the small girl with the calm eyes. Her opponent was a soft-spoken 9-year-old named Jessa who had trained with a private coach for 2 years. She looked terrified. Elena smiled as they Saturday. Hi, I'm Elena. Jessa nodded nervously. The game was quick. Elena saw weaknesses Jessa didn't even know she had. When it was over, Jessa burst into tears. I practiced every day for a year, she sobbed. I was supposed to win something this time. Elena felt her own throat tighten. You played really well, she said gently. Your night trap almost got me. Jessa sniffled. Really? Yes. Do you maybe want to be friends? Jessa looked up, blinking. You want to be friends with me? I don't have many who like chess, Elena said. Jessa gave a shy smile through her tears. Okay. They hugged across the board, and for a moment, the tension in the room melted. Underscore 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 underscore. By the end of the 4th round, Elena was undefeated. By the 5th, the press had swarmed. And by the 6th, the tournament director took the microphone and announced, for the first time in tournament history, our youngest player ever has reached the finals, Elena Thompson, age 8. Teresa clutched Donovan's hand in disbelief as the crowd clapped. Elena looked down at the stage from behind the curtain where finalists waited. She didn't know how she got here. She just knew she wanted to keep playing, keep learning, keep dancing across the board. As she walked toward the lights, applause ringing in her ears, Elena smiled not because she'd won, but because the game had only just begun. The night before the finals, the hotel suite was wrapped in an unusual silence. Outside, the city of Manila twinkled like scattered pieces on a vast board, and inside, Elena sat curled on a plush armchair by the window, absent-mindedly moving an invisible rook with her fingers. Teresa stood near the kitchenette, nervously twisting a tea bag in her hands. Donovan paced near the bookshelf, then stopped. It's time, he said softly. Teresa nodded, her eyes meeting his. Yes, she whispered. She deserves the truth. Elena, sweetheart, Teresa called gently, and the girl turned, sensing the change in their voices. Can you come sit with us? With quiet curiosity, Elena moved to the couch, settling between them like a piece between two players unaware of the game unfolding around her. Teresa reached into her bag and pulled out an old, folded photograph. Her fingers lingered on it for a moment before handing it to Elena. The child unfolded the photo slowly. It showed two people younger than they were now, Donovan and Teresa, sitting under a mango tree, a chessboard balanced between them, laughter frozen in time. Elena tilted her head. This is you and Mr. Reed? Teresa nodded. Yes, a long time ago, before you were born. Elena looked at Donovan, then back at the photo. She didn't say anything right away, but her fingers ran gently over the image, as if touching something delicate and important. Then, softly, she asked, Why are you showing me this now? Donovan sat forward, his voice unsteady but calm. Because I should have told you earlier, and I'm sorry I didn't. Elena, I'm your father. The room went still. The city lights blinked behind her, but inside, everything froze. Elena stared at the photograph, then at Donovan. His eyes that matched her own, the quiet way he thought before he spoke, like he was always planning his next move. For a moment, she didn't speak. Then she blinked slowly and said, That's surprising. Teresa opened her mouth to say more, but Elena raised a hand gently. I need to think. And she did, like she always did, with the calm and clarity of a chess player facing an unexpected position. Her fingers curled into her palms, and her mind began to move. So many pieces, Mama lied, but maybe not to hurt me. Mr. Reed is dad, but he didn't know either. That's why he stared at me sometimes like I was part of a puzzle he'd forgotten he started. When she finally looked up, there were no tears in her eyes, just understanding. It's like a move I didn't see coming. But it's not bad. Just new. Donovan's voice cracked. You're not angry? Elena shrugged gently. No, I think I'm adjusting. Like when someone plays the Queen's Gambit and you have to stop and figure things out. She looked between them, her voice steadier than either of theirs. Let's just go slowly. Slowly? Teresa asked, her voice cracking with emotion. Elena nodded. Like a new chess opening. You don't always know how it ends, but you learn as you go. We can still be a family. Just one move at a time. Tears filled Teresa's eyes. Donovan reached for Elena's hand and held it between both of his. Whatever pace you want, we'll follow it, he said. I'm just so proud of you. Not for winning. For being you. Elena smiled, small and thoughtful. Then tomorrow, she said, we'll see what a Thompson Reed can do on the board. That night, when she went to bed, she didn't dream of checkmates or queens. She dreamt of hands reaching across a chessboard, not to compete, but to meet. And when morning came, she rose not just as a finalist, but as a daughter who had finally learned the truth of where she came from and who now knew she had two people beside her, ready to walk each step forward. Together, the tournament hall had never been this full. Hundreds of spectators, cameras, journalists, and chess officials from around the world had gathered under the grand chandeliers of the Manila International Convention Center. The air buzzed with anticipation, whispers rising like waves as people leaned toward one another, asking the same question, could the 8-year-old really win it all? Elena stood in the waiting area, wearing a simple white blouse and navy skirt, her black hair tied in a neat braid. Her fingers fidgeted with the hem of her sleeve as the announcer's voice boomed over the speakers. And now, the final match of the National Young Minds Chess Championship. On board 1, reigning champion from Singapore, age 15, with an international ELO ranking of 2,100, Nathan Su. A wave of polite applause filled the room. The tall boy with sharp features and a navy blue blazer walked confidently to his seat, barely glancing at the crowd. And his challenger, making tournament history as our youngest finalist ever, age 8, from Manila, Elena Thompson. The applause this time was thunderous. People rose to their feet. Elena walked to the table, small and quiet but steady, like a piece finally reaching the center of the board. As she sat across from Nathan, he leaned back in his chair and smirked. You're the one everyone's fussing over? He said. You look like you should be in a coloring contest. Elena blinked once. I like coloring, she replied calmly. And chess. He rolled his eyes. Don't take it personally when this is over in under an hour. I've beaten kids twice your age. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her focus had already dropped into place, like a pawn becoming something more. The game began. The first few moves were classic, pawn to e4, pawn to c5, Sicilian defense. Nathan was aggressive from the start, striking fast, trying to corner her early. The audience watched in breathless silence, murmurs rising with each piece captured. By the 15th move, Nathan had sacrificed a bishop to launch an attack on Elena's queenside. But Elena didn't panic. She didn't frown or fidget or flinch under pressure. Instead, she leaned closer to the board, her chin resting on her folded hands, eyes sweeping the battlefield as if listening to music only she could hear. You look nervous, Nathan taunted, trying to rattle her. It's okay. Most kids cry when they lose. Elena looked up, her voice soft but steady. I'm not scared. I'm thinking. The audience was hanging on every word, every gesture. Donovan and Teresa sat together in the front row, their hands clasped tightly. Dr. Agbayani stood further back, arms crossed, eyes gleaming with pride. The reporters scribbled notes like mad. Move 25. Nathan began to grow frustrated. Elena had countered each of his traps, neutralized his pressure, and now her knights and bishops were creeping into his territory like shadows. She wasn't playing to win quickly. She was waiting for something, and then it came. A gap, a slight overextension in Nathan's kingside. One rook drifted too far. One pawn pushed just a little too fast. Elena saw it. She closed her eyes for a breath. Then, with perfect calm, she picked up her queen. A gasp rippled through the crowd as she placed it on a vulnerable square. A sacrifice. Nathan blinked. He looked at the board again. That's a mistake, he said aloud. But when he captured the queen, his confidence evaporated. Elena's bishop slid into position. Then her rook pinned the knight. Her remaining pieces moved with fluid grace, cascading like falling dominoes. Check. Nathan's king shuffled uneasily. Check. He looked again, tried to escape, but every route was closed. Every square controlled. Checkmate, Elena whispered. For a heartbeat, the room went utterly silent. Then it erupted. Applause thundered from the walls. Spectators leapt to their feet. Flashbulbs exploded from every direction. The announcer's voice cracked as he shouted her name, and Elena simply sat back, her face calm, her hands folded neatly in her lap. It had been just another puzzle, another beautiful dance across the board. Nathan stood slowly, stunned. Then, to his credit, he offered his hand. You were incredible, he said, voice quiet. I didn't see it coming. Thank you, Elena replied. You played really well. Teresa and Donovan rushed forward, tears in their eyes, and wrapped their daughter in a tight hug. Dr. Agbayani approached next, bowing slightly. I have never seen anything like that in my entire career. The tournament director handed Elena the towering golden trophy, almost half her height, and the crowd roared again. She accepted it with both hands and looked up at the camera flashes, unsure whether to laugh or cry. Reporters called out, Elena, how did you feel sacrificing your queen? Did you plan the combination 5 moves ahead? What's next for you? She simply smiled and said, I just love playing. In the crowd, a young girl whispered to her father, I want to learn chess too. And just like that, the game was no longer just about victory. It was about inspiration. Later that night, in the quiet of their hotel room, Elena placed the trophy on the nightstand and crawled into bed beside her parents. Donovan tucked the blanket around her while Teresa kissed her forehead. You changed the game today, Donovan whispered. Elena yawned, eyes already closing. It felt like magic. No, Teresa said with a smile. You're the magic. And as Manila's lights blinked gently in the distance, Elena slept soundly, champion, daughter, and dreamer, knowing the most powerful piece on the board was never the queen. It was belief. The tournament hall had never been this full. Hundreds of spectators, cameras, journalists, and chess officials from around the world had gathered under the grand chandeliers of the Manila International Convention Center. The air buzzed with anticipation, whispers rising like waves as people leaned toward one another, asking the same question, could the 8-year-old really win it all? Elena stood in the waiting area wearing a simple white blouse and navy skirt, her black hair tied in a neat braid. Her fingers fidgeted with the hem of her sleeve as the announcer's voice boomed over the speakers. And now, the final match of the National Young Minds Chess Championship. On board 1, reigning champion from Singapore, age 15, with an international ELO ranking of 2,100, Nathan Su. A wave of polite applause filled the room. The tall boy with sharp features and a navy blue blazer walked confidently to his seat, barely glancing at the crowd. And his challenger, making tournament history as our youngest finalist ever, age 8, from Manila, Elena Thompson. The applause this time was thunderous. People rose to their feet. Elena walked to the table, small and quiet but steady, like a piece finally reaching the center of the board. As she sat across from Nathan, he leaned back in his chair and smirked. You're the one everyone's fussing over? He said. You look like you should be in a coloring contest. Elena blinked once. I like coloring, she replied calmly. And chess. He rolled his eyes. Don't take it personally when this is over in under an hour. I've beaten kids twice your age. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her focus had already dropped into place like a pawn becoming something more. The game began. The first few moves were classic. Pawn to e4, pawn to c5 Sicilian defense. Nathan was aggressive from the start, striking fast, trying to corner her early. The audience watched in breathless silence, murmurs rising with each piece captured. By the 15th move, Nathan had sacrificed a bishop to launch an attack on Elena's queenside. But Elena didn't panic. She didn't frown or fidget or flinch under pressure. Instead, she leaned closer to the board, her chin resting on her folded hands, eyes sweeping the battlefield as if listening to music only she could hear. You look nervous, Nathan taunted, trying to rattle her. It's okay. Most kids cry when they lose. Elena looked up, her voice soft but steady. I'm not scared. I'm thinking. The audience was hanging on every word, every gesture. Donovan and Teresa sat together in the front row, their hands clasped tightly. Dr. Agbayani stood further back, arms crossed, eyes gleaming with pride. The reporters scribbled notes like mad. Move 25. Nathan began to grow frustrated. Elena had countered each of his traps, neutralized his pressure, and now her knights and bishops were creeping into his territory like shadows. She wasn't playing to win quickly. She was waiting for something. And then it came. A gap. A slight overextension in Nathan's kingside. One rook drifted too far. One pawn pushed just a little too fast. Elena saw it. She closed her eyes for breath. Then, with perfect calm, she picked up her queen. A gasp rippled through the crowd as she placed it on a vulnerable square. A sacrifice. Nathan blinked. He looked at the board again. That's a mistake, he said aloud. But when he captured the queen, his confidence evaporated. Elena's bishop slid into position. Then her rook pinned the knight. Her remaining pieces moved with fluid grace, cascading like falling dominoes. Check. Nathan's king shuffled uneasily. Check. He looked again, tried to escape, but every route was closed. Every square controlled. Checkmate, Elena whispered. For a heartbeat, the room went utterly silent. Then it erupted. Applause thundered from the walls. Spectators leapt to their feet. Flashbulbs exploded from every direction. The announcer's voice cracked as he shouted her name, and Elena simply sat back, her face calm, her hands folded neatly in her lap. It had been just another puzzle, another beautiful dance across the board. Nathan stood slowly, stunned. Then, to his credit, he offered his hand. You were incredible, he said, voice quiet. I didn't see it coming. Thank you, Elena replied. You played really well. Teresa and Donovan rushed forward, tears in their eyes, and wrapped their daughter in a tight hug. Dr. Agbayani approached next, bowing slightly. I have never seen anything like that in my entire career. The tournament director handed Elena the towering golden trophy, almost half her height, and the crowd roared again. She accepted it with both hands and looked up at the camera flashes, unsure whether to laugh or cry. Reporters called out, Elena, how did you feel sacrificing your queen? Did you plan the combination 5 moves ahead? What's next for you? She simply smiled and said, I just love playing. In the crowd, a young girl whispered to her father, I want to learn chess too. And just like that, the game was no longer just about victory. It was about inspiration. Later that night, in the quiet of their hotel room, Elena placed the trophy on the nightstand and crawled into bed beside her parents. Donovan tucked the blanket around her while Teresa kissed her forehead. You changed the game today, Donovan whispered. Elena yawned, eyes already closing. It felt like magic. No, Teresa said with a smile. You're the magic. And as Manila's lights blinked gently in the distance, Elena slept soundly, champion, daughter, and dreamer, knowing the most powerful piece on the board was never the queen. It was belief. The morning after her historic win, Elena woke to find the golden trophy gleaming at the foot of her bed, bathed in soft sunlight. The events of the previous day felt like a dream until she sat up and saw the newspaper spread across the hotel desk. Her name was splashed across the front page, Elena Thompson, age 8, crowned National Youth Chess Champion. Her photo, taken mid-game with eyes focused, hands hovering above the board, had already become iconic. But for Elena, the real victory wasn't in the attention. It was in how the game had made her feel, focused, free, and quietly powerful. The press followed her relentlessly that week. Interview requests flooded in. TV producers wanted her on talk shows. Sponsors offered scholarships, deals, training programs. But when asked what she wanted to do with her prize money, a check far larger than anything she'd ever seen, Elena gave an answer that stunned them all. I want to buy chess sets, she said simply, for schools that don't have any, so other kids like me can play. And so, with Donovan's help, she launched her own initiative, Chess for Change. It began with a shipment of 200 wooden chess sets to public schools in Metro Manila. Then came the free workshops, hosted in borrowed classrooms and barangay halls, where Elena would teach children how to set up the board, how the knight moved, how the queen danced. She spoke softly, patiently, letting each child touch the pieces, just like she had that first day in Donovan's study. Reporters followed her at first, drawn by the novelty of a child prodigy with a heart for others. But after a while, the story changed from a brilliant girl to a growing movement. Kids who had never touched a chessboard were now practicing during recess. Schools began forming their own clubs. Teachers asked for guides. Volunteers joined in. And all of it was led by a girl who never once tried to be anything other than herself. Despite the fame, Elena's life remained rooted in simplicity. She still lived in the cozy apartment with Teresa, where the kitchen smelled like garlic rice in the morning and the walls echoed with laughter by night. Her bunk bed remained unchanged, except now a chess puzzle calendar hung beside it. Donovan didn't move them to his mansion, as some expected. Instead, he started coming over, first for afternoon lessons, then for dinner, then to help with Elena's homework. The space between them slowly closed. They built something fragile and wonderful, a rhythm. Sometimes Donovan would take Elena to his home for the weekend. They set up a special room just for her, filled with chess books, puzzles, and even a small upright piano she had always wanted to learn. But no matter how grand the space, Elena still preferred their kitchen table at home, where her mom's laughter echoed louder than any applause ever could. It wasn't a perfect story. There were moments of awkwardness, unspoken memories between Teresa and Donovan that still ached at the edges. But they didn't rush. They spoke honestly. They showed up. They let Elena lead. One evening, as they sat eating arroz caldo by candlelight during a citywide blackout, Elena looked up from her bowl and said, "I think we're kind of like a team." Donovan smiled. "A chess team?" "No," she said thoughtfully. "A family team. We all play different pieces. But when we work together, we win." Teresa reached across the table and squeezed her daughter's hand. "That's exactly right." As the months passed, Elena continued to grow, not just as a chess player, but as a young girl learning how to carry a gift without being consumed by it. With her parents' support, she balanced school, tournaments, and her Chess for Change initiative with surprising grace. She still had sleepovers with friends, got scolded for forgetting to do her science homework, and begged her mom for extra dessert. Fame never changed her, it just widened the circle of those who saw her shine. One Saturday, at a public school in Quezon City, Elena handed a small boy a worn chess set with faded squares and a missing pawn. "It's okay," she whispered, placing a marble in place of the missing piece. "Even broken boards can teach us beautiful things." And in that moment, surrounded by laughter, chalkboards, and possibility, Elena Thompson, a champion, daughter, dreamer, realized that the game she loved was never really about winning. It was about giving people the courage to move forward, one square at a time. Months had passed since Elena's triumphant victory, but life had settled into something both extraordinary and wonderfully ordinary. She still walked the same hallways at her local school, still brought her small magnetic chess set in her backpack, and still ate lunch on the same wooden benches under the acacia trees. The only difference was that now, when she unfolded the board, a dozen kids gathered around her. "Your night's exposed," her friend Nina would say, and Elena would grin. "That's what you think." The media had long since moved past the sensation and into something deeper, a growing respect. Journalists no longer just asked about her games or ratings, they wrote about her kindness, her calmness under pressure, her ability to meet every win and every loss with the same steady grace. Headlines shifted from chess prodigy to the girl who makes chess feel like joy. And when Dr. Ernesto Agbayani was invited to speak at a national conference about the future of chess in Asia, he said simply, "Elena Thompson didn't just change the game. She changed people." True to her word, Elena had kept her world wide and bright. Every weekend, she and her parents traveled to community centers across Luzon, sometimes in shiny vans with donated boards, sometimes in beat-up cars with nothing but backpacks and notebooks. In each dusty classroom or barangay hall, she'd kneel beside other little girls, showing them how pawns became queens and how every piece, no matter how small, had a purpose. "You don't have to be the strongest," she'd say. "Just see the board clearly, and trust your next move." She made new friends in every town. Some of them went on to win small tournaments. Others didn't care for winning but came back every Saturday anyway because Elena made chess feel like story time, like magic, like something built just for them. Back at home, life flowed in quiet harmony. Donovan didn't move too fast and Teresa didn't hold back anymore. They took turns picking Elena up from school, worked on Chess for Change materials late into the night, and slowly rediscovered what it meant to parent together. Elena still lived in the apartment she'd always known, though Donovan had insisted on fixing the leaky sink and painting the walls himself. She still called him Dad, only when it felt right, but it felt right more and more often now. Their favorite tradition became family chess night, not held in grand libraries or under chandeliers, but wherever life felt the most real. One night, after a long outreach trip, the three of them stopped at a quiet beach town off the coast. With nothing but stars overhead and the sound of waves in the distance, they unpacked their foldable chessboard and sat cross-legged in the sand. "Okay," Donovan said, brushing sea spray from the pieces. "House rules, family chess. One move each, then rotate." Elena first, Teresa added, unwrapping snacks from a paper bag. Elena leaned forward, her hair tousled by the sea breeze. She moved a pawn 2 steps ahead. "Bold," her mother joked. "Calculated," Elena replied with a wink. They played under the stars, laughter rising between turns, the board glowing faintly in the lantern light. Every few moves, they'd pause to share stories from their day, Donovan talking about new school partnerships, Teresa describing a little girl in Zambales who had checkmated her older brother for the first time, and Elena simply smiling, soaking it all in. As they finished the final game, an impromptu draw after too much laughing to concentrate, Elena leaned back, her eyes on the sky. "Do you think stars are like chess pieces?" she asked. "Each one waiting to be part of something?" Donovan looked up, following her gaze. "Maybe. Maybe some just need someone to notice them." Teresa reached out and pulled them both close. "Well, I think the world noticed you." "No," Elena said softly, resting her head on her mother's shoulder. "The world just remembered that chess isn't about being the smartest or the strongest. It's about finding your next best move, even if it's small." They sat in silence for a long time, the sea washing the shore, the moon climbing higher. In that stillness, there were no trophies, no cameras, no strategy. Just love. The girl who had once stared longingly at a golden chessboard she wasn't allowed to touch now held the whole world within reach because she had dared to play. Not to win, not to conquer, but to connect. And as the waves whispered secrets to the sand and stars glimmered like scattered queens across the sky, Elena Thompson smiled, knowing the truest victories in life weren't found in checkmates. They were found right here, in moments like this, in families that chose each other, in laughter shared under the stars,